The day is March 8, 1990, and the residents of Boston are still celebrating St. Patrick's Day. As the clock strikes midnight, the city's Isabella Steward Gardener Museum turns into a stage for one of the biggest heists in history. 13 irreplaceable art masterpieces worth a mind-boggling $500 million would be stolen. But it wasn't the sheer size of the crime, but the shocking way it happened that would stun the world. Two fake police officers somehow managed to get past two security guards, bypass the security systems, and walk right out the front door and into the night. This is a crazy story involving a hippie guard often high on drugs, a criminal mastermind with an eye for precious works, a mafia figure assassinated shortly after the heist, and museum management who kept the museum's security vulnerable as part of the dying wish of museum founder Isabella Gardener, who might hold the key to unraveling this heist. Many questions would be raised. Why were specific masterpieces by Rembrandt and Vermeer targeted, while leaving behind even more valuable works? Was this a meticulously planned operation or an inside job gone wrong? What really happened that night? The museum's founder, Isabella Gardener, was a wealthy Boston elite with a controversial past. Some loved her, while others despised her lavish lifestyle, flaunting her wealth, and even creating enemies in the art community across the world, which may have eventually come back to haunt her. This is the insane story of the biggest art heist in history. The Isabella Steward Gardener Museum is a sight to behold. Built in 1903 by Isabella Gardener, the museum established itself as a treasure chest of history, culture, and priceless art. Isabella's love for art was born during a painful time in her life. The sudden death of her 2-year-old son and a subsequent miscarriage left her in a deep depression and a need to fill a void in life. And after inheriting a fortune of $1.75 million in 1891, Isabella and her husband decided to travel to take their minds off their loss. It was during their adventures abroad that they became interested in fine art and began to collect some of the world's finest pieces. Since they had the money, the couple expanded their collection to the point where they needed a bigger space to hold all of them, which eventually led to the birth of the Isabella Steward Gardener Museum. The museum was loved by many. It was a spectacle. Its brilliant architecture drew visitors into a world where they could almost feel what an artist felt like while creating their masterpieces. The works of Rembrandt, Vermeer, and Degas were included. However, Isabella was your typical museum goer. She defied norms for women of her time by smoking, driving recklessly, and wearing revealing fashion. She even walked a pet lion through downtown Boston at one point. However, not everyone praised her. Some were captivated and delighted by her eccentricities, while others were shocked or outraged. One of the most dramatic events in her life was the infamous Titian affair in 1896, when she secretly purchased the famous artist Titian's masterpiece, The Rape of Europa, from a French art dealer for a record $100,000. Using a fake name. When news broke of the sale, it caused outrage in Boston and France. The French government demanded the return of what they deemed a national treasure sold to a foreign buyer. The Minister of Fine Arts criticized the purchase publicly, and the French press depicted Isabella as perpetrating an American invasion of European art. Undeterred, Isabella kept the painting. Though tensions eventually eased, the notorious affair cemented Isabella's notoriety as a bold and unconventional collector. By the time Isabella died in 1924, the museum had some of the rarest pieces in the world and over $3.5 million in funds. But despite this museum having a huge potential to expand, Isabella's legacy of "my way or the highway," where she always got what she wanted, would live on after her death through her now infamous will. In it, she stated, "The arrangement of the artwork should not be changed for whatever reasons, and no items were to be sold or added to the collection." This was a decision that Isabella made to protect the legacy of the museum. But little did she know, the same decision would turn out to have dire consequences for the very art she cherished. As time went on, despite the perfect outward appearance of the museum, Isabella's beloved museum was suffering behind closed doors. With increasing running costs, the museum began to experience severe financial troubles. By the late 1980s, the situation had reached its breaking point, and it was impossible to maintain the building. Paint was cracking, and without a humidity control system, preserving paintings was becoming difficult. An old pipe even burst, flooding a room of paintings with raw sewage. The museum's decline didn't just affect its walls and room temperature, it also affected its security. Even though the museum had over 60 motion detectors and several cameras, almost everyone knew that this was a complete joke. It was only a matter of time before tragedy would strike, and the first attack happened in 1982, when the museum experienced its first robbery attempt. But thanks to the inexperience of the robbers, they were quickly arrested and thrown in jail. But this botched attempt opened the eyes of the management to the risks they were sitting on. But rather than invest in more cameras and better technology, they thought it would be a good idea to simply hire some extra guards. 6 long years after the first heist, they were finally able to afford an independent security consultant, who recommended that they make some important upgrades as quickly as possible, especially considering the museum couldn't afford insurance. But shockingly, the museum board ignored the recommendations because they didn't have the money for it. With limited funds and strict rules from the original owner, Isabella Steward, to not sell any of the art, the museum found itself in a predicament. They were caught between preserving history or ensuring the safety of its art pieces. If only they could easily sell a few pieces to raise money for the museum. But Isabella's will would always be a roadblock. And soon the museum's lack of security became public knowledge. It wouldn't be long before the infamous art thieves, Miles Connor and Bobby Donati, started frequenting the museum. The museum was a sitting duck, and to make matters worse, on the fateful night of March 18, 1990, the security guard on duty, Richard Abeth, was responsible for protecting hundreds of millions of dollars of irreplaceable art masterpieces. Was a young, inexperienced new hire with a drug habit and a bad attitude. A music school dropout, Richard dreamed of fame and wealth in the music industry. However, instead he found himself in a low-paid security gig. The job was dull. Every night the guards would complete their routines, Richard often in a disoriented, stoned haze, often flipping through magazines till the shift would end. But March 18th wasn't just different, it was a night that would change their lives forever. A lone car sits idle outside the Isabella Gardner Museum with 2 men inside, both dressed in Boston police uniforms. They sit in silence as one man puffs on a cigarette. It's St. Patrick's Day, 1990, and the drunken festivities echo in the distance. Inside the museum, 2 guards are on duty, Richard Abeth and Randy Hestand. Richard, often known for showing up to work stoned, was oddly sober and alert. His behavior that night would later be described by FBI agents as highly unusual. He would leave the security desk and proceed to open and close the side door to the museum. Was he signaling to someone or just checking the locks? And adding to strange events, not long after a fire alarm would go off within the museum, an apparent false alarm. At 1:20 a.m., Randy does a round of checks through the galleries. And while he's gone from the front desk, breaking the eerie silence, the buzzer from the outside door rings throughout the museum. Richard immediately responds through the intercom system. On the other end is a man who claims to be a police officer responding to a disturbance. And since the St. Patrick celebrations were still in full swing, Richard didn't see this as a big deal. So, against museum policy, he let the officers in the building. But once inside, it would immediately become apparent something wasn't right. The fake cops were hostile and confrontational, claiming there's a warrant out for Richard's arrest. This clever trick convinces Richard to step away from the security desk, a critical mistake, as the desk houses the sole emergency button, the only direct line to the outside world, to the real police. Randy, upon returning from his rounds, is shocked at what he sees. Richard is being handcuffed by police, and he is next. The guards are now unwittingly cut off from any potential rescue. And it's at this precise moment one of the fake cops boldly announces, "Gentlemen, this is a robbery." The guards are forced into the basement, bound with duct tape and incapacitated, leaving the criminals free to roam the museum. They waste no time and make their way directly to the Dutch room, where many of the valuable Rembrandt paintings hang. Using knives, they brutally slash Rembrandt's only seascape, Storm on the Sea of Galilee, valued at $140 million, right out of its frame. The second Rembrandt taken is a portrait featuring a Dutch merchant couple. But it wasn't only Rembrandt they targeted. Johann Vermeer's The Concert, a piece valued at more than $100 million, is also targeted. But as they go to take it, the vulnerable museum throws up one last weak resistance attempt, and an alarm goes off. The crime is on the brink of failing. Being caught would mean a long, hard prison sentence, something neither was willing to face. But surprisingly, no sooner had the alarm gone off, the thieves somehow knew exactly how to silence it in mere seconds, indicating they had a well-devised plan. This was not the only strange thing they did that night. They spent a total of 81 minutes in the museum. Most art heists last no longer than 5. Did they somehow know the real police weren't coming? Yet the most baffling aspect of the heist is their choice to steal a 12th century Chinese bronze beaker, an item of relatively common value, especially when compared with the significantly more valuable 13th century bronzes that lay nearby, untouched and disregarded. Why were such highly sophisticated criminals unaware of the value of the items they stole that night? Regardless, their loot that night was still staggering. In total, they managed to steal 13 classic pieces worth over $300 million. In fact, they took not one but 2 trips to their car, showing just how much treasure they had gotten away with. But the strange, unexplainable events would not end there. Just before escaping, they went back down to the basement and loosened the guards' restraints, and then casually walked right out the front door. But why would anyone steal such famous and valuable art, so recognizable? After all, selling it would be impossible. They would immediately get caught. This mystery would lead investigators into the criminal underworld, where motives and complex schemes beyond simple theft would emerge, suggesting a possible ransom plot. As dawn broke over Boston, the museum was as quiet as a graveyard. The morning team couldn't reach the night guards, the first sign that something had gone wrong. And authorities were immediately notified. However, the investigation into the theft was marred by a shocking lack of preparedness and organization. Valuable evidence, such as fingerprints, was either overlooked or mishandled. The FBI's arrogance in taking over the case didn't help. They weren't interested in what local investigators had to say, who were more familiar with Boston's criminal element. And the museum's own incompetence became evident when they didn't know what had been taken. It took weeks to confirm which 13 pieces were stolen due to poor record keeping. However, investigators quickly turned their attention to the guards, who stated, "The 2 men looked like police officers, not exactly that helpful." Speculation soon rose about the possibility of an inside job. After all, why did the thieves loosen the restraints on the guards? Richard Abath became of particular interest. Why had he mysteriously opened the side door minutes before the robbery? Suspicions would intensify when motion sensors in one of the rooms a painting was stolen from showed that the thieves never went in there. Someone had taken the art down for the thieves to take, and the last person to enter that room was Richard Abath. But the 2 guards passed several lie detector tests and had to be let off the hook due to a lack of hard evidence. The FBI then strongly encouraged the museum to put up a $1 million reward. As a result, the phones rang off the hooks, with leads pouring in. The focus shifted to Miles Connor, a notorious Boston art thief. His father, a police officer, and his brother, a priest, Connor was a complicated man. He was a musician who found himself at odds with his strict, straight-laced family, leading him down a path of rebellion that included many robberies and even being shot by police. However, at the time of the crime, Connor was behind bars, making it impossible for him to have executed the heist. However, it wouldn't be long before investigators made a connection from Connor to another suspect, with Boston mob connections, Bobby Donati. Bobby and a close friend who happened to be dating Connor's sister at the time were suspected of pulling off the heist in order to negotiate the release of Connor from prison. The heat was on Bobby. Investigators were closing in on him, connecting the dots. It would only be a matter of time before the entire crime and all suspects involved would be caught. However, things would immediately grind to a halt when Bobby was found dead in the trunk of a car, murdered. As a result, the investigators lacked any solid evidence and the case went cold. The museum's reward was then increased to $5 million and eventually $10 million in 2017 to try and generate leads. This ploy seemed to work, as during the investigation, a certain Tom Mashberg, a reporter from the Boston Herald, claimed he was approached by the supposed criminals. He claimed that they led him to an abandoned warehouse under the cloak of darkness, and there he caught a glimpse of what seemed to be the Storm on the Sea of Galilee, a stolen Rembrandt masterpiece from the Heist. No one could really verify if Tom was telling the truth or not. For starters, it would be impossible to see the painting in the dark, and there was really no way to verify if Tom actually met with the thieves or just wanted a viral story. So Tom's lead got thrown out and the case finally went cold. Today, hundreds of tips regarding the stolen artwork have been received from various parts of the world, including Japan and even France, with speculations that the French, harboring resentment for the art Isabella Gardener had tricked them into selling her all those years earlier, finally had their payback. However, to this day, this priceless artwork remains lost, its absence marked by empty frames in the museum. A stark reminder of what was taken during history's largest art heist. These criminals might have gotten away with their crimes, but a certain smuggler named Brian O'Day wasn't as lucky. If you found the story of the Isabella Steward Gardener Museum heist intriguing, then you shouldn't miss this video on the screen right now about Brian O'Day, the mastermind behind one of history's largest smuggling operations in the 1980s. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.